Hello everyone and welcome to this month's My Decorative Quilter 2 project of the month. This is a snap bag and it was designed for you by Rita Gizzard and presented by myself, Mark Garretts. I'm a National Floriani educator. So as I always like to do before we get started, I like to show you a picture of what the finished project is going to look like. And here's a picture of two different sizes of snap bag. One's a 6-inch, one's an 8-inch. And you can see that it's a quilted block that we have created into a bag. You'll have the option of creating either a 6-inch or an 8-inch version, and you'll probably choose one or the other depending upon your hoop size. So let's go ahead and get started with the software section of this month's project. If you haven't done it already, come on up here to the upper left hand corner and click the new icon so you have a blank page to work on. And by the way, if I say click during this software section, that means that I want you to left click. So if I just say click, that's a left click with the mouse. If I want you to right click, I will say specifically right click. So to make sure that our pages and our screens are set up about the same, I want you to come up here to your top ruler bar, hover over the top of it with your mouse, and then right click on it. And when you do that, you're going to see a little box that opens up. The only thing you want checked is inches. So if any of these other things are checked here, you want to uncheck them and just make sure that inches is checked. And you should have a blank screen with no grid showing. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to load in a file. It's an SVG file that we've given you as part of the download with this software project. And you'll find it in your December 2016 projects folder. I'll show you exactly where that is. But to load in a piece of artwork, we need to use a special procedure. We can't just use the file open because that's designed to open either stitch files or our WAF files. Instead, what you want to do is come here and click File and come down here to Import Artwork. So click Import Artwork and it is going to open up a window allowing you to navigate to where this file is located. Now, you can see it right here. It's in the December 2016 folder. I'm going to click this drop down so you can see exactly where it is. It's going to be in your C drive, Floriani Designs, MDQ project, December 2016. So that's the folder it's in. It's called boxedsquare.svg. And you want to click that and then click Open, and it will bring in this square. Now this is artwork. None of this is going to stitch, and there's several pieces to this artwork here. If you look over here in your sequence view, you can see we've got 3 colored sections, and these represent the 3 different colors of fabric that we're going to be using. And then you've got some lines here, and these are going to become our stitches. And we're going to fill in these fabric areas with some stitches as well. So the first thing we need to do is we need to resize this to the proper size for the size of the bag that you want to make. Now I said in the beginning you have the option of creating either an 8-inch or a 6-inch bag, and which one you choose will depend on what size of project you can fit in your hoop. So for the 8-inch version, you're going to need a 200 by 200 millimeter hoop. For the 6-inch version, you're going to need a 150 millimeter by 150 millimeter hoop. You can make either one if you have the biggest hoop. I will just let you know that it's a little bit more difficult to construct the 6-inch one because it's just a little bit smaller and it's a little tougher to work with, but don't be afraid of that if you can only make that size. So the first thing you want to do to resize it is come over here to the Transform tab. You want to make sure that inches is checked. You want to make sure that Maintain Aspect Ratio is checked. And here we're going to change our size. Now I'm going to make the 8-inch version in this lesson, but if you want to make the 6-inch version, I'll give you some alternate numbers. So for the 8-inch version, you don't want this to be 8 inches because by the time we add in our seam allowance and everything else, it won't actually fit into an 8-inch or 200 millimeter by 200 millimeter hoop. So what we need to do is make it a little bit smaller. So since Maintain Aspect Ratio is checked, all I need to do is type 7.5 into the top box, and the bottom box is going to change automatically. And then I'm going to go ahead and click Apply. Before I do that, I want to let you know that if you're using the 6-inch version, you want to put in 5.5 instead of 7.5. So go ahead and click Apply, and that's going to resize it so that now whatever we do will fit into our hoop. So the next thing we want to do is come over to our properties box, and we want, our sequence view, and we want to click on this fourth item, which is the outline that goes around the edge. And we are going to convert that into some stitches so we can create our placement and our tack down lines. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our one-click wonders down here at the bottom. We're going to use this one right here, our run stitch. So with this one selected, come down to here and click on run, and that's going to create a new object down at the bottom that's actually a run stitch. Now this is going to be our placement and tack down lines, so we don't need this to be a full stitch length of 3 millimeters rather. We can do 4. So I'm going to come up here and type in 4 and click apply. So this is going to be the placement, and again, it doesn't need to be a super tight stitch, and we are going to make it a 4. So that's what we've done. And then the next thing we're going to do is we are going to click on our transform tab, and what we want to do is we want to bring this down just a little bit so it comes in, and what we're going to do is change it to 7.35. So I'm going to backspace and type in 3.5. Remember that I have maintain aspect ratio checked, so the bottom one changes automatically. And of course, if you have making the smaller version, you want to change this to 5.35 instead of 7.35. Okay, so once you've done that, go ahead and click apply, and you can see that it brings that placement line in just a little bit for us, so we have a little bit of margin outside the edges. What we're going to do next is we are going to click on this last item in the sequence view if it's not already, and we are going to make a copy of it, and we're going to do that by coming up here to our copy icon and click it, and then we're going to click our paste icon, and now we have 2 runs. And what we want to do is we want to change the color of the second run so that it separates itself from the first one. So to do that, we're going to come over to our color palettes that are already in here, and we're going to click on number 4, which is gray, and it's going to, as you see, change it into a second color. Now SVG colors don't have actual thread colors, so that's why these all say NA. Now what we want to do here is we want to change the properties of this to a bean stitch, because this is actually going to be our tack down, and we're going to cut up against it. So we want a tighter stitch, and we want a bean stitch, which is 3 repeats. So we're going to come up here to our properties box, and we're going to click the drop down to select bean, and then we're going to come over to our stitch length and change it to a 3 and click apply, and that's going to give us a tighter triple ply stitch here, which is perfect for our tack down line. And what we want to do now is we want to come back up to the 4th item, and we're going to create yet another run stitch, and we're going to come back down over here to our one-click wonders, and we are going to click run, and that is going to give us another run stitch down here at the bottom. So that kind of creates all the lines that we want, and what we need to do now is we need to create some placement lines where we can put our fabric applique pieces down. And to do that, we are going to click on the black outline of the quilt block here. So it's this item, it's our 5th item down in the sequence view. We're going to click on that, and once again we're going to convert that into a set of run stitches using our one-click wonder by clicking run. So now we've got a set of run stitches that will create the placement line for our fabric pieces, and we are going to put each fabric piece down as a little applique piece. So you'll see how that goes when we get to the construction. So this set of stitches is going to show us where everything is going to go. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add in some quilting stitches, and to do that we're going to scroll our sequence view all the way back up to the top. We're going to click on this first item here, and we are going to, and this is the fabric for all of the outside and the inside pieces, and we're going to add some advanced stippling stitches to that. To do that, we're going to come over here to our advanced stippling icon and click it, and it's going to bring up a window showing us all the advanced stippling options that we have available, and we want to find stipple number 28, which is right here, and go ahead and click on that. and it's going to go ahead and bring that in, and it's going to put our stippling in all around here. Now, if you are using the 6-inch version of this, you want to leave your pattern size at 15. You can leave it at 15 for the 8-inch version, but we're going to make it a little bit bigger for the 8-inch. Looks a little bit better at 20 for the larger size bag. So I'm going to change my pattern size to 20 and click apply, and that looks just a little bit nicer. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to come back up to the top of our sequence view. We're going to click the plus icon next to the second item of fabric. And so we're going to click this plus, and this will open it up so we can see all the pieces underneath. And what we want to do is we want to select all the diamonds. So we've got 4 diamonds here and here, so we're going to select the first one by clicking on it. Then we're going to hold down the control key on our keyboard and click the next 3 diamonds. So we're going to skip this triangle and go down and select the next 3 diamonds. So now we can apply some stippling stitches to these areas all at once. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to come over to our advanced stippling, and we're going to click on that icon one more time down here in the one-click area. This time we're going to scroll way down because we want pattern number 163, and that's right here, stipple 163. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and you'll see that that brings that in. And again, if you are using the 6-inch bag, you'll want to keep this at 15. If we're going to do the 8-inch bag, we're going to change it to 20, which is what I'm going to do since we're using the 8-inch version of the bag. So I've got that a nicer size now. And what we need to do now is we need to add in our cover or finishing stitches for our appliques. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to come back up to the top of our sequence view, and we're going to make that one small by collapsing it by clicking on the minus icon there, and we're going to come to the 5th item down, the 6th item down, which is this turquoise set of stitches here. I'm going to select them, and I'm going to come down to my one-click wonders, and this time instead of doing a run, I'm going to click on the motif. So that's going to bring up a default motif of 201, and we don't want 201, we want a different motif in there. We actually want motif 250. So what we're going to do is we're going to click the down arrow. We're going to scroll down in this list here till we find 250, and we're going to click that, and we want to change the pattern size again for this. So we're going to change it to either a 6 for the 8-inch block or a 5 for the 6-inch block. So we are doing the 8-inch, so we're going to change it to a 6. Again, it would be a 5 if you're doing the 6-inch block, and that's going to put in our nice set of motif stitches here in order to tack down our lines. The last thing we need to do in creating this block is we need to move our seam allowance line down to the very last thing. So we're going to come in our sequence view and we're going to find the 3rd run, okay, which is actually this one right here. It doesn't look like a run right now because it's collapsed, but if I click the plus, you'll see that it's a run. And we need this to stitch out last. So I can either click here or here, doesn't matter, either one. And what we're going to do now is right-click on that, and we're going to get another dialog, and one of the options here is move, and you want to just come over here, hover over it, and click on last, and that's going to move it down to the end. And so it is going to be the last thing that stitches out for us. So what we want to do now is we just want to save this. So what we're going to do is come up to our save icon, and we are going to click save. Looks like a little floppy disk, and we are going to find that folder. So what I'm going to do is click the drop down, and I want to go to Floriani, and I want to go to Designs, and I want to go to MDQ Project, December 2016, and I am going to name this Snap Bag Block. So I'm going to call it SNAPBAGBLOCK, and it's going to save it in the WAF format by default. We want to do that, so you want to make sure you always save your master file in the WAF format. This project hasn't actually been released yet, so there's nothing in here matching it. You may have one that's already named that, in which case you could call it My Snapbag Block or something so you don't write over the file that's here. So go ahead and click Save. And the last thing you need to do is you need to save this in your machine format. The way we do that is come up here to the File menu, click File, and click Save As. And now, instead of saving it as a WAV file, we want to click the drop down here and change to a machine format. So I'll use PES version 9 here for my Baby Lock or my Brother machine, and click Save. And now I have saved it in my machine format. So all you need to do now is take that file, put it on a jump drive, and take it over to your machine. So that completes the software section of this lesson, and we're going to move on now to the construction details. So let's go over the materials you're going to require for this month's project. You're going to need some Floriani embroidery batting, some Floriani nylon no-show mesh stabilizer. You want the non-fusible. You're going to need some Floriani Applique Wonder or Quilter Select Applistick, either one. You're going to need some embroidery and bobbin thread, and you want to choose top colors that work well with your fabric choices. You'll need some R&K embroidery perfection tape, that's the pink tape, and you'll either need a 6x6 150mm by 150mm or 8x8 200mm by 200mm hoop size. The fabric details for this month's project include 3 fat eighths or scraps in different colors. For the 8-inch version, you're also going to need one 8-inch by 20 1/4 inch section for the lining, 2 6 3/4 inch lengths of steel retractable ruler, that's like a tape measure, and 2 8-inch by 8-inch pieces of batting. For the 6-inch version, you're going to need one 6 by 16 1/4 inch section for the lining, 2 4 1/4 inch lengths of steel retractable ruler, and 2 6 by 6 inch pieces of batting. First, you want to prepare your fabric. Now, you have the option of cutting the applique pieces with a digital cutter, and that would be like a scan and cut, a silhouette cameo, or similar, or you can cut them by hand. If you're going to use a digital cutter, the first step is to fuse either Applique Wonder or Applistick to the back side of your fabric and then place it down on your mat. Do not remove the backing paper before placing it on the mat. You want to use the included SVG files, those are for almost all cutters, or the FCM files, those are for your scan and cut, and you want to use those with your cutter and your cutter software to cut the pieces out. You always want to refer to the manufacturer's guidelines for blade depth, blade speed, and pressure, but always do a test cut first as fabric varies in how it cuts. The age of your blade is also going to make a difference here. If you're going to cut the pieces manually, first thing you want to do is print the included SVG files, and you want to use the versions in the folder called the print versions on the paper side of your Applique Wonder or Applistick, following the printed instructions that are included with this project. And you want to make sure you use an inkjet printer to do that, not a laser. Then after you've printed the patterns, then you fuse your Applique Wonder or Applistick to the back side of your fabric and then cut out your pieces by hand. So we're going to prepare to embroider now. It's important to note, though, that some of the color changes in this design are there specifically to make your machine stop between steps, so you can take the hoop out, add your applique fabric and your batting down, etc. You have the option of leaving the same thread in, or you can change it as desired. That's up to you. But it's important to note that if you have a multi-needle machine, you want to use the machine controls to insert the reserve stop commands to make sure that the machine stops on the thread changes rather than continues on like a multi-needle wants to do. So now we're going to embroider the design. First, you want to load your snap bag block design into your machine. Hoop up a piece of Floriani nylon no-show mesh, get it nice and tight. Attach the hoop to the machine and stitch out the first color, which will be the placement line for the batting. Next, you want to place the batting in the hoop centered over the placement lines, and you can then optionally secure the corners with embroidery perfection tape, and then stitch the next color, which will be the tack down for the batting. So remove the hoop from the machine, then remove the tape if you used it, and finally trim the batting close to the stitch line, as close as you can get. Stitch out the next color to stitch out the placement lines that we're going to use for all the fabric pieces. Next, you want to remove the backing paper from the back of the first piece of applique fabric and place it on the batting, repositioning it as necessary to align it with the stitches, and then repeat that for all the remaining pieces. A hint is that it's easier if you work from the center out. So work from the center out, don't try and do all the same color all at once. And accuracy here is important. If necessary, load in a different color for the first set of quilting stitches and go ahead and stitch that color out. If desired, change the thread color for the second set of quilting stitches and go ahead and stitch out the next color, which will stitch out those quilting stitches. Again, if desired, change the thread color one more time for the cover stitches, stitch the next color to stitch the cover stitches, and then stitch the next color to stitch the seam allowance guidelines. Probably not necessary to change the thread color here because those stitches are probably going to be hidden in the seam. So now just remove the block from the hoop and trim it to either 8 inches or 6 inches square depending on which size bag you're making. And just a hint, a Quilter Select 8-inch or 6-inch square ruler are perfect for this because they are cut exactly to the size. Repeat the procedure to make a total of 2 blocks, one for each side of our bag. And that completes the embroidery section of this project. So now we'll get into the assembly of the actual bag. First thing you want to do is draw a chalk line 1 inch from both ends on the liner fabric on the back side. You want to draw a second set of lines, and these need to be 4 1/4 inches from both ends, and you can see how this looks in the diagram here. Now fold both ends of the fabric into the first line and press. Next, fold both ends of the fabric into the second line and press, and then you want to stitch both of them close to that inner edge. Now fold the lining in half lengthwise with the right sides together and make sure the sides and the top match. Stitch only one side using a 1/4 inch seam allowance and then press that seam open. To create a boxed finish, fold the stitched bottom corner as shown in the picture here. To make certain that your fold is centered, stick a pin straight down through the seam and then turn the fabric over, and the pin should be sticking out through the center of the fold like you can see in the picture. Next, you want to place a ruler so that one of the ruler's lines is centered on the seam and the edge of the fabric crosses the ruler's edge at 3/4 inch on both sides, so 3/4 of an inch away from that center line on both sides. And then you want to draw a line along the ruler's edge. If you don't have a ruler that's cut right up to the edge like this, you could use a seam guide instead. Next, you want to sew along that line and then trim to 1/4 inch away from the outside of it. Now on the other side of the lining, mark a 4-inch gap in the center. You can see it in the picture here. They're very faint blue lines and they're lined up with the ruler lines. And this gap is going to allow us to turn it inside out. You want to sew up from the bottom to the gap using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, then change your stitch length to the longest stitch possible and sew across the gap using a 1/4 inch seam allowance and stop at the end of the gap. Next, place several pieces of embroidery perfection tape over the sharp edges of the rulers. Then insert a ruler into each hem, and the rulers should be facing each other as you can see in the picture here. You want to use a regular stitch length and sew now from the gap to the top using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so that side will now be completely sewn. Now box the remaining corner just as you did for the previous corner, and then remove the stitches from the gap. Those are the long stitches. Now put your lining aside and get your 2 blocks and place them right sides together. Sew the sides and the bottom together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance from the edge, and then you want to press open those seams, and then you want to box the 2 corners as you did for the liner, and then you want to turn the whole thing inside out. Now on the lining, you want to slide the rulers to the inside edge of the hem, that's away from the top, and pin them in place, and this leaves a nice gap where we can stitch. And then you want to insert the block bag into that lining with the right sides together and match up your top edges. Set up your machine for free arm sewing and sew together all the way around using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then remove your pins. Now pull the bag completely through the 4-inch gap in the lining. Now fold over and line up the edges of the gap, and 1/4 inch stitch perfection tape makes this a breeze, and then sew the lining together either by hand or by machine. Now tuck the lining back inside the bag, and that completes your snap bag. So that completes this month's project. We want to thank you for attending. We hope you'll use this video along with the printed PDF instructions to recreate this project at home. And be sure to check the project instructions because there's some cool extras in there that show you how to do some more advanced things. And we hope you'll come back next month for our next project. And we'll see you then. Thanks again.